Welcome to Ancient Greece Today. My name is Naomi. I'm a professor of classics at Harvard University, and I'm your host for this podcast series, which brings together scholars and artists to think about the ancient Greek world and its many afterlives. This season is Tragedy Today, and this episode is almost the last episode. There is one more after this. So far, we have talked about the Oresteia, Prometheus Bound, Oedipus the King, Antigone, Medea, the Bacchae, and now we turn to one more play by Euripides, The Trojan Women, first produced in 415 BCE. This is a play about those left behind in war, the women of Troy, after their city has been destroyed, their husbands, brothers, sons killed. It's often thought of as an anti-war play, and scholars have long debated how far it might be a commentary on the Peloponnesian War, and in particular, a response to the Athenians' actions on the island of Melos in 416 BCE. When the Melians refused to join the Delian League and pay tribute to Athens, the Athenians attacked and slaughtered all the men of Melos and enslaved the women and children. That question, did Euripides mean Trojan Women to be a commentary on that moment in the Peloponnesian War? Is it a commentary specifically on what the Athenians did at Melos? That question has dominated a lot of the scholarship on this play. We'll never really know the answer. And there are many other ways to think about this extraordinary tragedy. To explore some of them, I brought together two wonderful people, Ella Haselswerdt, assistant professor of classics at UCLA, and Rosanna Bruno, artist and illustrator of Trojan Women, a comic. Now, Ella, Rosie, and I talked about Trojan Women at a live event with an audience at the Center for Hellenic Studies in DC in April 2026. This episode, episode 8, is therefore very different from all the preceding ones, since it is a recording of that in-person conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Hi everyone, both here in person and on the screen. Welcome to this panel discussion of Euripides' Trojan Women across different forms and media. As I think you all know, this is being recorded as part of the Ancient Greece Today podcast, which I've been working on over the last few months with wonderful colleagues from right here at CHS. The first season is Tragedy Today. This will be episode 8. Episodes 1 and 2 are already out, and you can find them at podcast.chs.harvard.edu. My name, I should have said maybe at the beginning, is Naomi. I'm a professor of classics at Harvard, and I've written and thought a lot about ancient Greek drama, including Trojan Women, for quite a long time. I'm joined by two wonderful guests, so let me introduce them now. First, Rosanna or Rosie Bruno, a New York-based artist who works across media, paintings, ceramics, and comics. She's the recipient of multiple fellowships, including a New York Foundation for the Arts Fellowship in Painting, and has published work in many prestigious venues, from the New Yorker to the Paris Review. Her first book, The Slanted Life of Emily Dickinson, was published in 2017. I highly recommend it. Her second, a collaboration with Anne Carson, called Euripides, The Trojan Women, a comic, was deemed the New York Times Best Graphic Novel of 2021. And then Ella Haselswerdt is an assistant professor of classics at UCLA. Ella's many publications include articles on Greek tragedy, for example, Sophocles' Oedipus at Colonus and Philoctetes, Euripides' Bacchae and Iphigenia and Aulus, but also on many other things, for example, dreams and the body in ancient Greek and Roman medical texts, and on Sappho, queer engagements with Sappho and Sappho in relation to materials and the practice of philology. Her book, Epistemologies of Suffering, Tragedy, Trauma, and the Choral Subject is forthcoming with Oxford University Press. So Rosie and Ella, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
The three of us, as you know, are going to talk about both Euripides' Trojan Women, first performed in 415 BCE, and how Rosie reimagined it in visual form. And then there will be time for a Q&A. But first, in case you haven't all read this tragedy or seen it recently, I'm going to give you a 5-minute summary of the play. So before we get started, I'm just going to do that. So the play, Trojan Women by Euripides, revolves around Hecuba, queen of Troy, wife of Priam, mother of the great hero Hector. Troy has just fallen to the Greeks, and now Hecuba has lost everything. She is a widow. She is no longer queen. Most of her family are dead. The play is structured around Hecuba's interactions with 3 other women: Cassandra, her daughter, the girl who can see the future but whom no one believes; Andromache, Hector's widow and mother of toddler Astyanax; and Helen, Helen of Troy, the one who apparently started this whole thing when she went off with Paris, or Paris went off with her, abandoning her husband Menelaus in Sparta. The scene is the shoreline of Troy, the city destroyed and smoldering in the background. Enter Poseidon. Now, when we think of Greek tragedy, we often think of the deus ex machina, the god who enters from on high, typically at the end of a tragedy, and effects some kind of resolution to what often seems like a completely irresolvable situation. In this tragedy, there's no deus ex machina. Instead, it begins with a god, Poseidon, and his role is not to provide resolution or closure, but to set up the entire play. Poseidon loved Troy, but he is now abandoning it. All the Trojan men have been killed. Most of the women and children have been enslaved. He tells us that the remaining few women are waiting in a tent, so that is the stage building, or the skene in Greek, to be divided up among the top Greeks, to be slaves, to serve their beds, to be raped. Hecuba is one of them. Her sons and daughters have been killed. Cassandra remains, and Hecuba thinks that another daughter is still alive, Polyxena, but Poseidon tells us that girl has been killed at Achilles' tomb. And then another god enters, Athena. She was on the Greek side, but she's so angry by how they've behaved recently. Ajax, the younger, raped Cassandra, seizing her as she clung to Athena's statue for protection. She's so angry that she wants Poseidon to help ensure great misery for the Greeks now on their way home. So she's setting up here the shipwrecks of Odysseus and others. And then these 2 gods depart, never to return, so that the rest of this play is a profoundly human drama. We're really on the human plane here, not on the divine plane. Hecuba restarts the tragedy with a lament, and you could say that this whole play is a lament. As she sings of her suffering, she's joined by the other women, the chorus, all wondering where they'll go, who their masters will be. And then the Greek herald, Talthybius, enters, and he tells them, Cassandra is to be taken by Agamemnon, Andromache, Hector's widow, by Neoptolemus, son of Achilles. Hecuba herself will be slave to Odysseus. As Hecuba starts mourning again, in comes Cassandra, not lamenting, but instead singing a distorted marriage song. We might talk about this. It's one of the most unsettling moments of the entire play. Everyone thinks that she's crazy, but she soon delivers a speech pointing out how bad the Greeks have it too, have had it and will have it. All those bodies unburied, those men who died far from home, and all the disasters that await them, as they try to return to Greece. Cassandra is taken off, and Hecuba mourns, while also wondering where her daughter Polyxena is. The chorus sing a song then about the night Troy fell, the Trojan horse, the famous story, and then Andromache is brought in on a cart clutching her son, Astyanax, little Astyanax. She and Hecuba perform a lament together before Andromache breaks off and tells Hecuba about Polyxena, that she's been killed too, sacrificed for the ghost of Achilles. And then Andromache reflects on her own past as Hector's wife and now her future to serve the bed of Neoptolemus, the murderer of Priam and the son of the man who killed Hector, her husband. Hecuba tries to console her, but then in comes Talthybius again, and every time Talthybius comes in, it's going to be something bad in this play. The news is even worse. The Greeks have decided that little Astyanax is to be thrown to his death from Troy's walls. Andromache, distraught, says goodbye to her son, and then he and she are led off. What can you say after that? The chorus resort to singing of Troy's past, going all the way back. And then there's an abrupt shift. In comes Menelaus, the Greek general, ordering his wife, Helen, to be brought out. He's not going to kill her yet, but definitely bring her home to Sparta, where he will kill her, for sure. As Helen comes out, Hecuba implores Menelaus to kill her now. Helen asks if she can defend herself, and there follows a long, remarkable scene where, as in a law court, Helen delivers a defense for her supposed actions. It wasn't her fault, and Hecuba counters her as prosecutor with a rhetorically brilliant speech. Menelaus is swayed by Hecuba, but then Helen begs for her life, and he decides to resort to his initial plan to take her back to Sparta, where we all know she will live. The chorus sing of what Troy has lost, what they have lost in every respect, both the city and their families, the people within it, and what awaits them. Does Zeus see all of this? Do the gods care? Then Talthybius enters again, this time with the corpse of Astyanax laid upon the shield of his father. Andromache, as she was taken off by Neoptolemus, begged that Hecuba bury her son's body. Hecuba mourns as a grandmother now, and then she and the chorus adorn Astyanax's body for burial. Attendants carry him off, and now Talthybius announces it's time for the city to burn completely, for the Greeks to leave with the Trojan women. And Hecuba and the chorus close the play with an extended lament, splitting the singing between them. The chorus sing the last two lines of the play. Io, Io is a cry of lament. Io, wretched city, but now set your foot forward toward the Achaeans' ships. So that is the Trojan Woman. It is a devastating play. It's a very powerful play, and it's been a very influential play put on in this country regularly since 1915. I'm really glad to be joined by you two to try to discuss what is actually a difficult play to really get to grips with, because it seems like a play where nothing happens. So maybe we could begin with a deceptively simple question. I might direct this to you first, Ella. Sure. What is this play about? And how do we go about approaching it, given that there doesn't seem to be much of a plot?
Yeah, thank you. A great summary. And yeah, what is this play about? I mean, so on its surface, obviously it is a play that is about war, but not war itself. It's about kind of the shadow side of war, war's aftermath, about those who don't get to be the heroes in the war, but who suffer its consequences. And interestingly, I think because of that, the structure of the play, as you note, it doesn't have a plot in the sense that we're used to, right? Like, typically, Greek tragedy is very plot-driven and often characterized by some major reversal where things suddenly aren't as they seem. And here, the only real action that happens or real surprise that occurs over the course of the play is the condemnation of the baby to death. And then that does happen off stage, which is terrible, but it doesn't have the effect of a reversal. It is just more devastation kind of stacked up. And, you know, I think that this is, again, it is related to the fact that this isn't a dynamic war plot. This is a kind of rumination. And even I was thinking the prologue that you describe, it starts with Poseidon, and then it's a conversation between Athena and Poseidon. Often these Euripidean prologues really kind of set up the plot, like set up the action, kind of prepare you for what's going to happen. But as you say, nothing really happens. So, you know, Poseidon gives us a little bit of backstory, and then it moves to the future. And oddly, what we end up getting is something more like a prologue for Homer's Odyssey. Like Athena says, I'm going to make Odysseus' homecoming really hard for him. And that's totally, you know, post-dramatic action. And so the play kind of exists in this really weird, like, liminal space, I think, where it's almost kind of outside of the time of these epic narratives, and it's just an opportunity to kind of lament in this, like, circular way. And that's something that the chorus does as well. Like, they kind of move forward and backward in time, but not not in a sort of straightforward progressive way. And then it was interesting in your summary, you brought out how often, too, the women on stage sing. Like, they are kind of sucked into this choral, this kind of circular kind of mode of expression. Song in tragedy typically happens at moments of extreme heightened emotion, usually negative, right? It is a kind of proper to lament. So I think that the fact that, like, nothing happens is actually totally integral to the meaning of the play. That's my take.
And makes it so experimental.
Yeah.
Even if we might think, oh, this is the most tragic of all tragedies because it's so sad. But actually it's quite remarkable for this very reason. Yeah, what do you think, Rosie, coming at it from a different angle maybe?
So I really was thinking of the experimental part, because I think Euripides left a lot of space there. And what we're given, like, after I read it, I mean, this is going to sound really funny, I thought of that song, War, What Is It Good For? And it really kind of hit home. And, we are left looking at the most vulnerable people who are left to, there's nothing left for them. There's nothing left but a lifetime of slavery. And so I feel like there's a lot of space in that play to feel that. And that's what I was most struck with, is that kind of room to experience that grief. And it is one long lament and several laments from the viewpoints of different women in the play and the chorus, but they're different. I mean, everybody has a different viewpoint and different way of coming at it, which I really appreciated.
Right, there's a range of women in this play. Hecuba, the chorus, Cassandra, Andromache, and Helen, of course, and they each have a different experience that's right. being drawn upon, and that they're relating in different ways. They each have different relationships with Hecuba, so it's a series of relationships being performed on stage as well. And so there's all of these different ways to explore the experiences of this moment after your city has been utterly destroyed, and in this liminal space as you're just waiting. That is the play. They're just waiting to be to go on.
Yeah, they each have kind of a different orientation to the future too, in a way, right? Like, that's one of the things that characterizes the differences in their lament. Like, I don't know, thinking about, like, Andromache's insistence that, it's more enviable to be dead than to have the future that's laid out for her. Cassandra's kind of bizarre mania in the face of in the face of these circumstances, which maybe we'll get into.
Well, she knows the future.
Yeah,
So
right, exactly. Yeah, she knows the future, and she can see, she's going to see it come back around. She's going to see, even if there's no hope for her, she does get to see some form of like vengeance wrought, and so that gives her this kind of like lively spark in a way. And then, yeah, Hecuba as well has a hard time envisioning a future. And then Helen is kind of a whole other situation.
Helen is always a whole other situation, because you can do more than any other figure, right? You can sort of do anything with Helen. Maybe we could actually talk about Cassandra for a little bit, and as we think about what each of these women does in the play or for the play. So I just already mentioned that when Cassandra comes on stage in what is apparently an endless lament, she comes on stage singing, and she's singing a wedding song, or a hymenios in Greek. This is a song that typically would be sung by a chorus. A chorus would sing and dance this, and now it's just one solo figure performing her own wedding song, which of course underscores the fact that this is not a wedding for her. She is going off to be raped multiple times, and she also knows that she is going to her death, because Cassandra knows her future. She knows that she is going to arrive in Argos with Agamemnon and then be slaughtered along with him. So yeah, it's a pretty it's a pretty disturbing scene. Do you have any more thoughts on Cassandra? And this actually might be an interesting way to mention how you render Cassandra in your Trojan Women.
Well, interestingly enough, in a book full of dogs, cats, and cows, and a strange gearbox, Cassandra is the only human form. And she is deranged, and yet she is the least absurd character, visually in the book. So that was intentional. I mean, that was sort of a way to accentuate first of all, that she knows the future and that no one believes her, and she's presenting as a human being, and also she's deranged from the war, but she also provides fake news. I mean, she talks about the Greeks losing the war, like they are worse off than the Trojans who are dead, and that they are not on a moral high ground, and then tells you that they will be destroyed. So I found that part of it very interesting. And I tried to make her look as wild and out of control as possible.
It's a very striking, that the image, it's a full page of one of these large pages, and Cassandra's looking directly at you, like she's in a way. And I don't know if you were thinking at all about in kind of ancient iconography, if somebody's looking straight at you like that, it means typically that they're either like drunk or insane.
I was not thinking about it in terms of ancient iconography, but I was just thinking about it in like human experience.
Sure, yeah.
Not that you can't look straight at a person, but there's a way in which like a certain type of eye contact that can be uncomfortable and strange, so.
And she's got the torches, which is another, so, her entrance is actually heralded by the herald, the messenger, seeing fire inside of the tent and being nervous that the women are burning the tent down. And Hecuba says, oh, no, don't worry about it. That's just my daughter. She's crazy.
Yeah.
So she's got these torches. And, again, wedding, these are kind of a nod to wedding torches, but kind of wedding procession. But also, fire comes back in really interesting ways through the play, throughout the play, like in the choral ode about the Trojan horse. There's fire kind of visible from within the horse. And there's a reference, too, to the fact that in some versions of the story, when Hecuba is pregnant with Paris or Alexander, the person who seduces or rapes or certainly kidnaps Helen, that she has a dream that she's going to give birth to a firebrand. And so there's this kind of through line of this like kind of destruction and fire that again kind of it provides this sort of like looping temporality with her. But I just love that image in the comic. I found it so unsettling and amazing.
It was unsettling to draw.
Yeah.
I mean, really. And as I drew more and more flames, I thought, this is crazy. I mean, and I didn't know how it was going to play out, but it seems to be appropriate, actually.
Yeah. What about the other women in this tragedy, given that they're each afforded time and space? What roles do you think they play?
I was really struck by Andromache kind of being bitter about being such a wonderful wife and being such a compliant wife in a way, and she talks about like not going out and staying out all night and taking care of the baby, and how could this happen to her, and sort of this is what she gets for doing that. And I mean, I feel obviously Hecuba is the protagonist and kind of the emotional center of the play for me, but the Andromache pages were very difficult, I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Andromache is represented in the comic by a poplar tree, right? That's split
in the
and
middle.
also been uprooted. And again, the image that you drew. So she's like coming in on a cart with like all of Hector's armor, right, piled up with her, and you drew it so that it's kind of like askew in this way. And when I first got to the page, like I couldn't really parse what was going on. And then it kind of like became clear, and it's so gorgeous and unsettling. Like, so she's just this tree, and she's got a sapling in her arms. But I was telling them over dinner last night that I'm very rarely affected emotionally by Greek tragedy. As somebody who studies it, I typically kind of like, think of it in a more sort of removed or abstract way. But when I got to that image in Rosie's comic, I just started crying. Like it was so beautiful. And I don't know exactly how to phrase this as an answerable question to you, but I'm really curious about the kind of emotional process of putting that together. You talked about how Cassandra was difficult to draw in a way because she's such an unsettling figure, and like that's such an odd image, like this tree, and like how did you make it so moving?
That's a good question. I stared at the wall for a really long time. I mean, not even kidding. Because the way I worked on the book was I went page by page. Like first I read the translation through twice. And I didn't really have an overview of what it would look like or how I was going to approach it. And so after reading it twice, I just started from page 1. And each day I would do a page or two or whatever I could do, and it was during lockdown, so it was a very strange, dark period anyway. But when I got to the Andromache pages, I didn't know what to do. I mean, I like drawing trees, but drawing a tree split up the middle that's been uprooted, and also knowing what her fate is and knowing what she's going to say, I felt like I couldn't maybe do her justice, and that was really hard for me. So I didn't. Many of the pages I painted black, and started to go in with a white pen and sort of this kind of negative effect. negative meaning like a negative, not negative, even though it is negative. So it's the darkness kind of hits you over the head. But then when she is about to give over her son and sapling, I sort of fractured the panels. So there are these, instead of being 2 full panels or half panels, I just drew these lines that fractured the panels going out. And it's sort of this about separation. And when that came to me, that felt really right. And I felt like I managed to do it. But it took a long time to get those pages. Longer than the Cassandra page, because with the Cassandra page, I didn't want to go over crazy. But I wasn't as emotionally upset by that page. So,
I mean, it's definitely, for most people, the most harrowing part of this play, the moment when a mother learns that her baby son, her toddler son, is to be thrown from the battlements. It's also incredibly important for thinking about Troy disappearing. I mean, Astyanax's name means the leader of the city, so it's a symbol of how the city really is utterly destroyed, in addition to every part of Hecuba's family. And then there's the experience of the mother learning this and then having to say goodbye to her son as they're just immediately left off. It's actually quite abrupt. Just it's announced and then they're taken off. It's a very hard part of this play.
I just wanted to say one other thing about kind of conceiving of these pages is that in Anne's translation, there's a lot of metaphor, and my way in was to, it's kind of absurd, but to literalize the metaphors and to kind of draw everything as it's written, which is can be very absurd. And I found that it worked to bring you closer to what that meant. And if I had to draw an actual baby, I don't think I could, like knowing that what was going to happen. So
it would be great in just a few minutes to talk a bit more about this collaboration and the process. But I feel like because we're sort of going through these women, maybe we could. No, not at all. So we've talked about Cassandra and Andromache, but the big one is Helen, because it's just such a bizarre scene. It feels like a bizarre scene. It's such an abrupt shift in register in the play. What is Helen doing here, and why is she represented in this way? Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, Helen is always a really fascinating puzzle, and whenever she pops up in any piece of ancient literature, there's this, especially in Euripides, I feel like there's always a little bit of a tonal shift. It seems that he finds Helen sort of inherently comic, and so, maybe this entrance is a way to kind of break some of this, the horror of the previous scene. But, Helen is she's ground zero. She's like the weapon of mass destruction. She is, potentially the cause of this entire conflict. So, thousands of deaths can be blamed on Helen, and they are, throughout Greek literature. Although often that kind of castigation comes from Helen herself. So in the Iliad, she speaks very negatively about herself, and blames herself for everything that happened. And it's relatively unusual, right, to have another character just kind of come out as strongly against her. But I think she's important, though, to have in this play. I think that she's crucial because this is a play that is kind of ruminating on the role of women in war, or the impacts of war on women. In a way, I think Helen is, she represents a way that men can blame it on women, right? So not only are they the kind of ultimate victims, but it's also in some way their fault. So she can kind of be this punching bag. And it is like so interesting that, as you note, they go into this, it's this really kind of forensic, like courtroom scene. And later in the Greek tradition, this kind of becomes a sort of sophistic game. Like, can you create a defense of Helen that would hold up in a law court? And so, Euripides is either responding to some early version of that or anticipating that in some way. So this is very, like, again, we're talking about kind of innovation and experimentation. Like, this is a very modern kind of, avant-garde move, I think, for Euripides to undertake. But yeah, she tries to find ways to argue that she didn't really have agency in the situation. And Hecuba's response, in particular, like Helen brings up the beauty contest. So this is this famous kind of mythological moment where Athena, Aphrodite, and Hera come to Paris, Alexander, and ask him to tell, indicate who is the most beautiful among them. And if he chooses Aphrodite, then he gets Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world, and he does. And Hecuba's response is, why does Hera need to be the most beautiful goddess in the world? What, is she trying to upgrade her husband from Zeus? Like, it's a very funny sort of, dismissal of what I think is a very accepted kind of moment in the mythic tradition. But ultimately, right, as you note, like, Helen wins the scene because she does what she needs to do to persuade Menelaus to not kill her yet, and we know that he's going to kind of settle back into domestic bliss with her back in Sparta later on.
Yeah, and well, we were talking about this moment just yesterday, and had some disagreement.
Right.
Think about who are we meant to think delivered the best speech, has won this argument. My opinion is that Hecuba's speech is the real rhetorical tour de force, but it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because even when she has as powerful a voice as Medea's, she can't be a Medea. She remains completely powerless. But it also doesn't matter because all Helen needs to do after that is beseech Menelaus. And when I say beseech, I mean supplicate him, which means touching him. And it's Helen.
Yeah.
And so that means it doesn't matter, again, what Hecuba has said in words. So that's my opinion.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I've persuaded you yet.
I don't know. I think I'm easily persuaded by Helen. I find her to be such a fascinating figure that, I have maybe the same problem Menelaus does, where, it's, again, I think it's just such a, it's clear that to the ancient Greek imagination, I think this was a genuine kind of ambiguity or question. Like, can we blame this woman? Was she seduced? In which case, right, she has some, she has some agency in the situation, or does she, right? If Aphrodite decides that you should fall in love with somebody, do you actually have agency in that situation? Or was she kidnapped, in which it's clear that she had no agency? They kind of constantly return to this question. And then use it to various ends. And you represented Helen as a fox.
Yes. She's both a fox and a silver hand mirror. And that was just supposed to reflect the shape-shifting nature of her and how manipulative she is. And I think that she is much less of a victim than the others. I mean, she does have more agency than any of them because, as you say, I mean, all she needs to do is touch Menelaus and her life is saved. So I think she was really working it, whereas the others were really just suffering.
Yeah.
But also, I have to say, it was really fun to make her a fox, but also to make her a fox wearing a fox fur coat, which was really meta.
Well, and she's wearing like stilettos too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yes. And then I love the hand mirror too, because I feel like it speaks to this sort of ambiguity or this weirdness around her, where like, you know, she's kind of a void in a way. Like, is there actually anything there?
A void, and also, I mean, it's, you know, a sign of vanity too. It's the kind of representing her looks and her attraction to men, and so.
Maybe this would be a good moment to backtrack, which I should have sort of started with, but to ask you a bit more about actually how this project came about to begin with Anne Carson, and your sort of initial way of approaching it and what that process was like.
I'm sorry you've already heard this story, but Anne Carson, I met her through a mutual friend, and she asked me if I would like to collaborate, and I first thought she was joking, of course, and but I said yes, and she said, "Have you ever read the Trojan Women?" And I hadn't read it, and she said, "Just pick up a translation and let me know if you see anything." And I said, "Well, which translation should I pick up?" And she didn't give me any. She said, "Anything is fine. It doesn't matter." So I picked up one that was in an anthology with Anne's work. So I thought maybe this would be on the same wavelength. And I read it, and I didn't see anything. I mean, it was very troubling. I didn't see a single image. And, you know, it's a very upsetting play. And not only did I not see it, I didn't feel it. I mean, intellectually, I knew it was tragic and bad, but you know, one of the most upsetting scenes with Hecuba and Andromache talking about what they've lost and sort of comparing their scars, I just rolled my eyes at that, and that's bad. That was really upsetting. So I decided I couldn't do it, and I went to Anne and told her I couldn't do it, and she said, "Well, would you read my translation?" And from page 1, you know, this big wave coming in and I saw images all throughout, and it was really exciting and really fun, and also a challenge. And I thought, yeah, I could, you know, this would be great. So that's how it came about, and yeah.
And so it was. I mean, this shows the importance of
translation
understood in the broadest possible sense, right? How a version of this play that initially, Anne Carson's translation version, that may initially seem quite far from the text, actually the original text actually seems to capture something about it that can, through images that are not in the play itself a lot of the time, but just sort of somehow gets at the essence of it, and then that communicates to you what this is about, instead of a sort of more traditional, very textual translation.
Yeah.
And,
you know, I mean, the women were reduced, I mean, to dogs and cows, and how that came about was, I mean, Anne, we discussed it beforehand, but Anne also decided to write that in, and she wrote them as dogs and cows. And then the question became, how do we deal with the chorus? And so she sent me a sticker book full of dog breeds, and all the stickers were kind of set in a grid, and these were all purebred dogs. And I said, wow. She said, I think we should do the chorus as a series of mugshots. What do you think? And I said, yeah, that works perfectly. And so I did that, but I included, of course, cows, and I also included mutts, because I thought that was very important, given their new status. I mean, the women of Troy. And it was to dehumanize them, but also to make them more sympathetic and to have more empathy. I mean, some of these dogs could be pets. I mean, they look like your pets. And so, yeah, that was one of the major decisions.
One of the extraordinary things about the chorus, as it's rendered in this, is how, yes, they're made up of cows and dogs, but somehow they seem to hold a sort of increasing gravitas or sort of power over the course of, well, power is the wrong word, but there's something very substantive about them as you work your way through this. And then finally, at the end, when everything is disintegrating, on the final couple of pages, and they're about to be divided up, and really are about to be divided up and go on their way, and it feels like they've lost their voice entirely. Yet this chorus of dogs and cows deliver this final line on the very final page, which is almost all black, and you just see an image of the ship, just "we go on," which I find an incredible statement of survival. And somehow, over the course of the comic, putting animals in these roles make that all the more powerful. I can't quite articulate why, but it's definitely the case.
I mean, I wonder too, like, how much did it factor into this decision that in Euripides' other play about Hecuba, at the end there's a prophecy that she turns into a dog. And in this, here she starts as a dog, but a dog among many dogs, right? So that animality or that kind of like ultimate degradation or index of grief, I don't, however we want to understand the transformation, is just kind of manifest from the beginning, like it's already happened, all of the worst possible thing. And I really thought that, Hecuba is this old dog, and especially your illustrations of her as this like saddled dog kind of lying on the ground, captures so well this kind of feeling in the play, and this even staging in the play. Like Hecuba's almost always lying down, right, through the entire play. I think the only reason that we know, and I could be wrong about this, but I was trying to track it, I think the only reason that we know that she ever stands up is that occasionally she'll say that she's going to lie down again.
Yeah.
And, for any character in a Greek tragedy to be on stage for the entire time, that's relatively rare. Like that is a kind of position of great authority. But then for her to be horizontal for most of that, I found extremely striking. And she makes a lot of references to her body being kind of beaten down, and like it's very visceral. And I think that comes out really well, this like saddled dog lying on the ground with, her teats kind of old, and there's that image, and maybe in the very beginning where it's like her memory of having all of her puppies nursing. I found
50
it to be
50
very,
puppies.
Yeah.
At least. But also she was a sled dog, which is a tough, strong dog who had to work really hard, and so to be a kind of washed up, withered sled dog is even more tragic.
Yeah. I wanted to go from that image to this question, which is, this is a comic book. And we've briefly mentioned some potentially comic moments in this play. Where do you think the power of comedy is for Trojan Women, given that it seems to be one of the bleakest of all Greek tragedies? Or is there any comedy?
I mean, so when I first read this translation, I talked to Anne about the comedy in it, and she said, well, that's Euripides. And not having read that much Euripides, I didn't know that. I didn't know that that was there in the original text. So that was really interesting to me, and also because I was really afraid of how many kind of comedic things we were putting in there. And the comedic elements were to heighten the tragedy, which, you know, the old saying is like laughing and crying, or there's a thin line between those two things. And I really do think it was a risk in this case because it is so devastating. And but I feel it works in that it makes you feel more, and at least I hope it does, because I mean, there's that whole spread with Cassandra. There's like you know, the marriage, the magazine saying how to please your husband, and acts as an important accessory to have, and you know, all these things that kind of drive the point home of not only what her future will be, but also this way in which these women had to kind of suffer the patriarchy, basically.
And that brings us back also to how innovative this play is, the original play, in its hybridity. I mean, it's this remarkable thing about it. It seems sort of static, like it's one long lament, and yet it brings in lots of other forms, from a wedding song to the law court, and it goes beyond what might be expected of a tragedy. There is even an awful joke in this play. There's an obvious joke, and it's an awful one, at least to a modern ear, when Menelaus is confused as to why he shouldn't bring Helen back to Sparta on his ship. You know, Hecuba is trying to persuade him, don't take Helen with you, kill her right now. And he says, why? Has she put on weight? So doesn't go down well now. But the very fact that there is that obvious joke sort of maybe alerts you to the potential comic texture of this play, which, as you say, makes it even more devastating.
Well, and the joke was delivered by Menelaus, who was such a tool. So that's very appropriate there.
Who then, in Carson's words, is some kind of gearbox. in your version.
Which was so, I was like, what's a gearbox? I read that, and then I asked Anne, she goes, well, I don't know really, but it's some sort of mechanism. And I looked up so many pictures of gearboxes and just came up with a mixture of all the gearboxes. And yeah, it's very, and then there's a point in the book where Helen and Hecuba are making their speeches, and he's trying to figure out what to do, where the wheels are turning, and you see the friction from the gears spinning. And so that's Menelaus thinking.
Yeah, I think, it's funny. It took me a little while to totally understand that representation of Menelaus, but the more I think about it, the more I like it, because there's something, the way that you rendered it, like there's a way in which it looks almost kind of threatening, like it's I don't know, it's metal and there's stuff jutting out, and everybody else is kind of organic in some way.
It's also very phallic. I mean,
yeah. But Menelaus also is always represented as kind of adult, just like sort of a dummy, and then there's this kind of like ineffectuality to it too. It's like, okay, here's this instrument, but what's it for? It's like totally worthless or like totally useless. In this context, and then the idea of like the gears kind of slowly cranking, like trying to understand what's going on when these like women are
talking in circles
high,
around,
like high rhetoric. It's I think it works.
Maybe as we begin to wrap up our conversation and then hear what others have to say, maybe we could branch out somewhat from the Trojan Woman and just think about, given that we've just been talking about different forms and different registers, and we're talking about this comic book of the Trojan Woman. A big question, what different forms can tragedy take, both in theatre and beyond? Of course, it can take many forms, but what have you found maybe most effective, and what new meanings do you feel a play can take on through other media? It's quite a big question, but I think it's an important one, both for this conversation, sort of branching out from this particular experimentation with Trojan Women, and actually for the podcast in general, which is bringing together artists across different media to talk about their work in this season with tragedy. Ella, do you have any thoughts?
Oh my gosh, well, yeah, it is a really big question, and I guess that I'll say, I always appreciate kind of pushing the boundaries of media in various ways, and not to, you want to branch out, and not to return, but I do want to say, a little bit about, I think that the book form is actually a really interesting way to stage something. Like there's a sort of drama of turning the page, and particularly when it's not just a traditional book. I think that can be really powerful and kind of lends itself to a little bit more of the, you kind of can get some embodiment in there, but it also brings in a lot of elements that are kind of difficult to represent on the stage, in fact, even though these are texts that were designed to be performed. So I'm quite drawn actually to kind of these like experimental book forms. But yeah, I mean, the incredible thing about it is that there are just infinite possibilities. And people are constantly drawn back to these texts for whatever reason, and the stage too is a great way to interpret and bring in different elements and embody these kind of central questions in different ways. Yeah. So
I like the book form too, not just because I just did one, but I think it's interesting to have. Like in this book, we kept the stage directions, which was a way of sort of having that bridge between kind of a performance and a comic and a visual book. But I also like music as a possible thing, because there is music in many tragedies. I mean, not that this one has a lot of music, but there's music, and there's also sound. There's the implication of sound, like even when at one point, I think in Hecuba's first lament, she says, "And no bird sings." Mm-hmm. And that just makes you think of the absence of sound. So I like the idea of music being a more explored field.
Yes, and I'll say that one of the productions that I'm most interested in for Trojan Women, we've gone back to Trojan Women, and that actually makes it makes a lot of sense, not simply for our conversation, but because it does lend itself actually to generic innovation and sort of transmedial innovation. One of my favorite, one of the productions I find most interesting is Trojan Woman by the Singaporean director Ong Keng Sen, who produced a version in collaboration with the National Theatre of Korea several years ago. And for him, and this gets at sort of what this tragedy can speak to, a tragedy that was first performed in the context of the Peloponnesian War and what it might have been communicating to Athenians at the time. For him, this production really was meant to convey the experience of Korean women in the context of World War II, so the history of so-called comfort women who were forced into sex work by the Japanese army. But the thing that I love about that production is the combination of music. Music is really, really integral to it. So there's pansori, traditional Korean opera music, there's K-pop, sort of everything in between. So just to your point, that there's a variation in music that sort of follows the cadences of the play, and remind us that this is musical theatre if you put it on stage. So it's interesting to go from the power of turning the pages of a book, a very sort of one-on-one or individual experience, to that. And this play can encourage all those forms of experimentation.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question of the two of you? Do you think the reason why there are so many different versions of this play is because there is no plot and there is so much space in this play and it is experimental? Like, do you think, when I mean versions, I mean different interpretations in different media. Like, do you think that's a kind of an invitation to play with this text? Or do you think it's...
Yeah, maybe.
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 It's interesting because I think there are also a lot of quite traditional renderings of this on the stage. And maybe that's in part because there's always this feeling that it speaks to our time. So the first production of Trojan Women in this country was in 1915. Granville Barker came over from the UK with a big production put on at various college campuses, including Harvard. And that was 1915 in the context of World War I, and there's sort of this tradition of it speaking to one's time. And I don't know if you might think that has encouraged experimentation, but I think there's also something about the sort of feeling like, well, if we make this anti-war message with a very traditional Greek play, it might have more impact. I think there's been that too. And at the same time, I love this idea that it sort of leaves us space because it's almost plotless to do wacky things with it.
Yeah, I think you said it well. I do think that a lot of the impulse behind the constant return to this play is that it seems to so starkly stage an anti-war message, and that's not that easy to find in antiquity. The people are drawn kind of inherently to antiquity to look for kind of representations of our values in modernity. And, I think that this stages what people see as a kind of potentially universal experience of war, that there's always going to be an aftermath, there's always going to be those who weren't involved in the fighting but are suffering the consequences. And I think that feels particularly powerful to people. And then for those who maybe have a more sort of experimental or avant-garde mindset, they might see that sort of space that's in there for kind of formal experimentation.
Yeah. I think that's a great spot to leave our conversation with just the three of us. So thank you very much. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our discussion of this weird, moving, and really beautiful tragedy. Originally, the novelist Ferdia Lennon was going to join us. In the end, he couldn't make it, but I have recorded a separate interview with him that will come out as a bonus episode next week. Before I go, I'd like to thank some of the people who helped make today's episode happen. In particular, John Fletcher, Olivia Henderson, and Ryan Pascoe, along with other colleagues at the Center for Hellenic Studies. And then, as always, Denver Tolson, who has been putting all the episodes together and doing our social media, and David Elmer, who has produced all the music for this podcast, all of it based on fragments of actual ancient Greek music. If you want to know more about ancient Greece today and the various people involved in it, check out our website at podcast.chs.harvard.edu.